You see this beautiful tree? It's fall. A lot of the trees are turning pretty colors, but this tree actually has a story to tell. Good afternoon, this is Granny Fisher, and today we're going to talk about the U.S. presidential election. It's been 6 days. I'm talking to you on Monday morning. I'll upload this on Monday afternoon. But it's been 6 days since the presidential election was held, and still all the returns are not in yet. I stayed up until 4 a.m. Wednesday morning watching the returns, and I realized something as the night wore on, that all the returns were not going to be counted. Anyway, we're going to look at what happened in this election, what's still going on now, and what my take is on all this. Okay, in this election, a record-breaking number of people voted. There was roughly 70 million voting for President Trump, and according to the official statistics, a little over 70 million voting for Vice President Joe Biden. The problem you run into with this election is the manipulation of results. In some places, the people showed up to vote and were told that they had already voted, and they said, no, I always vote in person. They said, no, we got your mail-in ballot, you voted. And what the trainees for the poll workers were told in Pennsylvania is that if someone shows up at the poll and you already have them in the book as having voted, you tell them that they have already voted, and if they raise Cain and make a big scene and want to vote anyway, then let them vote, but put it in the provisional pile. And one of the trainees in this recording of the training session asked, and where does that go? And the instructor said, oh, those will be destroyed. So that is not a free and fair election. Another occasion in Michigan, they had installed these new voting software earlier in the year, and it switched the votes from Trump to Biden in 6,000 ballots. And this particular machine, this particular software was used in a large number of Michigan counties and in most of the states that are considered battleground states. And many of those don't keep a paper backup of the ballot. So there was a lot of hanky-panky going on in this election. I saw an interview between a former vice prime minister, assistant prime minister, whatever the vice president is in Australia. This man had served in that capacity in the past, and he was interviewing Victor Davis Hanson, an American scholar, about this election. And I highly recommend you go watch that interview. I'll have the link down below. Trump went to Washington to try and clear out the swamp, which was his term for the deep state. But it's so firmly entrenched, and it's both parties. And now we come to realize that it's also the press, because the press is suppressing any information about the illegalities that were done in this election. The press is totally complicit in this corruption. Fox News is a bone that the powers that be threw to the conservatives so that they would think they had a free press. When I was in Spain years ago, over 40 years ago, I spent a year in Spain. And I tried to tell them our TV was so much better than their TV, because our commentators are so polished and professional and knowledgeable and easy to believe. And they said, well, you know, at least in our country, we know they're not telling the truth. In your country, they're so polished that you think they're telling the truth. And And this is the first time I, as a retired journalist, am completely ashamed of the whole profession. Because when I came out of journalism school in 1977, we had been taught to be unbiased, to give equal opportunity to both sides on any controversial issue. And now you can't believe a word the press says. It's become a mouthpiece for the deep state. Do not believe your TV news. Do not believe your metropolitan newspaper. Your little local news is probably fine, but what power do they have to sway any kind of public opinion? Don't believe the press. If you want to find out the truth, find other avenues of communication. Go seek out information on some of the back channels on the internet. Go listen to a ham radio and hear what people in other parts of the country are saying. But find other avenues of communication. Start a newspaper. Do something to establish communication that's true and honest and transparent. That's not hiding anything, that doesn't have an agenda to promote, but is trying to seek the truth. Okay, the legal challenges have begun. In Michigan, where the 6,000 votes were changed in one county. This is in one county. 6,000 votes changed from Trump to Biden by the software. Pennsylvania was ordered by the legislature, by its state legislature, to not accept any ballots cast after 8 p.m. on Election Day. Well, a state Supreme Court overturned that and said, no, you have to give them 3 more days. Well, that's not legitimate because the court is not supposed to set law. They're just supposed to enforce the law, to interpret the Constitution. And so because they overturned the legal legislation that required all ballots to be in by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, then this case also is before the Supreme Court as we speak. Okay, I want you to realize that there are several states that are still not decided. If you go to Google, which I don't use Google very often, but they do have all the statistics of the election up there. If you just type in election results, you'll pull them up. And Georgia is still considered undecided, even though 99% of the vote is in, and it favors Biden by a slim margin. North Carolina is still undecided, although 99% of the vote is counted, and it favors Donald Trump by about 1.5%. Alaska is definitely undecided. After 6 days, they've only counted 50% of their votes. It's been at 50% of the votes for the last 3 or 4 days. And it's running 62.1% in favor of Donald Trump. Now tell me that there is any reason whatsoever that Alaska should not already have their vote in. There aren't that many people in Alaska, and this is running well in favor of Donald Trump. But they're withholding the results of their election on purpose. Now I'm going to tell you what I see going on. You've got powers in charge of the major influencers in this country. And when I say influencers, I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about cultural categories, you might say. The government, the press, the educational system. These are all in the grip of the deep state. And I am not going out crazy on a limb with conspiracy theories or anything. I'm telling you what I see as a former journalist, retired journalist. What I see in this country is the deep state, which is made up of bureaucrats that make laws. They're not elected, and they run things behind the scenes. And then you have the entrenched political powers in both parties that don't want to lose their power. And they're gradually shifting the whole country away from a constitutional republic to a socialist dictatorship. You see where we're headed in some of the representatives of the extreme left right now, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. She has set up a website that to keep track of Trump supporters. She's putting names out there of anyone who has contributed to the Trump campaign or has served in the Trump administration or has worked for Donald Trump. And she's asking people to send in names of anybody they know. She's making a blacklist on the internet of people that supported the Trump administration. Now think about that. Where do you hear about things like that happening? In communist China? Maybe. In Russia? I bet the KGB has lists like that. Why would a person in the United States make a list, an enemies list, like they said Nixon did? You know, President Nixon? They got all over him for having his personal enemies list. Well, this isn't personal, this is a public list. She's putting it on the internet. Now, what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like a free country? Doesn't sound like a free country to me. Watch what's happening. I pray that the darkness would be exposed. I pray that the truth would come out. And I pray that God's choice would be in the White House by the end of January. Now, I want to ask you to pass this video around to your friends if you get a chance. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe, all that kind of stuff, because right now we're not getting much exposure to anybody. I don't make any money off these videos. I guess you've noticed I don't have any commercials on here. But I'd like to see people start communicating. Comment in the comments below. Comment. Let us hear what you think. And now I'm going to finish the story about the beautiful tree. This beautiful tree, when we first moved here 5 years ago, was covered with vines. They were English ivy vines. It's an invasive non-native species. And they were all around the base of the tree, climbing up the trunk and into the branches, choking it out. They were killing the tree. The vines were killing the tree. See these scars? My son took a hatchet and chopped the vines loose from the tree. And in the process, he left some scars in the bark of this old tree. But let me show you something else. These are some of the vines. When they were cut loose from the root, they dried up. They died. And we've been burning them on a campfire out back. Now the tree's alive. It's a beautiful tree. It's a beautiful tree. And if we hadn't cut the vines away, it might have been dead by now.